Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. The memorials off the highway. Before I get down to detailing the events that transpired over the course of 7+ years, I think it's best to provide a disclaimer and to set some ground rules. First, I am not going to disclose the exact location of the shack. Trust me when I say you do not want to drive by it, especially at night. Second, I did a bit of sleuthing regarding possible reasons for the goings-on along that road, and what I found was disturbing, so I'm going to paraphrase the information for the sake of all those involved. Besides, this exercise is intended to get all of this off my chest in a relatively anonymous fashion. I don't want to be responsible for any amateur ghost hunters ending up hurt or worse. So now that I have laid some foundation and proper anticipation, I'll begin. Please bear with me on this retelling, as these events do take place over the course of many years. So if there are any inconsistencies or glaring questions, I apologize, trying to put it all together in as accurate a fashion as I can. Plus, I'm rather rattled after all of this, as you'll soon see. In August of 2007, I was relocating for work from Arizona to Oregon. The route I chose to take to Oregon was based upon making the best time, so scenery wasn't a priority. If any of you have traveled out of Arizona and into the eastern parts of California, you'll understand. It's desert, far and wide, with not much to look at other than the occasional comically shaped cactus. Anyway, I made it out of Arizona and passed through California easily enough and was just about to hit Nevada when I had to make a decision. Stop and stay the night in California, or push through most of Nevada to make for a shorter drive the next day. I chose poorly, of course. I neglected the tired voice in my head and decided to push on through most of Nevada. My reasoning was that if I made it far enough into Nevada, I could make it to Oregon relatively early the next day and possibly take in some sights. A glorious plan indeed. I looked at the time, around 6:30 p.m. I figured I could do another couple of 100 miles or so and then stay at the first hotel motel to pop up shortly thereafter. I'm generally not a huge fan of night driving, especially out in the middle of nowhere, so an hour or two of darkness tops was fine. Along this trip, I must have passed at least 20 or so abandoned dwellings. If you've ever been on the outskirts of any major city, you know what I mean. Abandoned houses, shacks, gas stations, RV parks, etc. Most of them have broken windows, graffiti, fire damage, you name it. As for the shack I encountered, passed by, it wasn't exceptional in any way. Just an abandoned shack 30 or so meters off the highway. However, what made this shack different was what took place as I approached it. Along parts of the Lincoln Highway in Nevada, the road is concrete instead of asphalt. Concrete is used along roads that are subject to flooding or heavy snow, etc., as it provides better protection from hydroplaning and inclement weather. The concrete is grooved in order to channel water down and away from car tires. Driving over these grooved concrete highways is interesting, though, as the treatment makes for some unique sound effects. If any of you have ever driven over these areas, you know what I mean. In my experience, the sound is either constant humming or at times an arpeggio of high and low tones. You can feel a bit of vibration under your vehicle, but it's generally smooth and unobtrusive. The longest stretch of concrete highway is the southeastern portion of the highway, which I hit around 8:45 p.m., and that was where things got weird. About 2 miles east of the shack, the humming of the road started sounding different, more focused, more coherent. What started as a low hum turned into a whine and then an actual wailing. I turned off my radio to get a better listen, and the wailing began to form words, or rather what seemed to be a word repeated over and over. Buried. It wasn't the Queen's English, but something more declarative, more primal, more agonized. Buried. The chanting carried on for about half a mile. when a more abrupt series of what I could only perceive as screams erupted from under my car. You! 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 I was a bit unnerved by this. More like a WTF moment. I started slowing down. I know, wrong thing to do. But I couldn't be certain the sound wasn't a mechanical issue with my car. I slowed down more and started to pull over towards the emergency lane on the right when I saw something in the road straight in front of me. A dark figure pointing directly at me. I slammed on the brakes and locked the wheels. I was incredibly fortunate that I was already slowing the car down, or I would have lost control. I released the brake and coasted into the emergency lane when it hit me. The wailing sound still continued. How is this even possible? That's when, within the light of my car's headlights, I saw the shack. I took a moment to clear my head. Was that a person I ran past? Through? And noticed that the wailing had finally ceased. I looked back behind the car and saw no one. The dark figure was gone, if it had ever been there in the first place. The shack wasn't particularly threatening or evil-looking, just an abandoned shack on the side of the road. What was curious about it, though, were the 3 roadside memorials in front of it. For those that don't know, a roadside memorial is a makeshift grave that marks an area where fatality occurred, usually involving a vehicle, hence the placement on the roadside. Generally, the memorial is marked with a cross and flowers and bears the name of the loved ones lost in an accident. At the time, I didn't make any connection to the shack. It just caught my eye. I was far more concerned that my car was going to need a tow, which would really suck as it was late and I was out in the middle of nowhere. I walked around to check the tires. Mind you, it's pitch dark out here, and there are no other cars for miles in either direction, so my inspection was hasty to say the least. Nothing caught under the frame. Tires seemed to be all right. Nothing leaking. Okay, looks good to me, so I get back into the car. The sounds didn't return. I gathered my senses and chalked up all the adventure to the fact that I'm rather tired from all this driving. That was what I told myself anyway, and so I started driving past the shack and back onto the highway. The dark figure nor the sounds returned, and I made it to a local hotel around 15 or so miles away and stopped for the night. I made it to Oregon without further incident. I actually made really good time and settled into my new location. Things have been great here in Oregon, although it could rain a little less frequently for my tastes. Fast forward to December during Christmas time off. I think back to the shack and that weird night and decide to check it out on Google Maps. I looked, and in July of 2007 there was a single memorial near the shack. Then, 2 months later in September there were 2, and a month later in October there were 3. I then looked at December of 2007 and there were 5 roadside memorials. This was a bit unnerving to see. It made my experience all the more real. While being the great procrastinator that I am, I decided to blow it off and enjoy the holidays. Besides, it really didn't affect me in any way, so why bother, right? Fast forward to October of 2009. I started having dreams regarding that night near the shack. The events in the dreams were nearly verbatim, as I remembered them, but within the dream state, they were much clearer, much more visceral. The dark figure was definitely pointing at me, screaming at me. You, it wailed as I sped towards it. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, and you guessed it. Chalked it off as too much wine or some bad sushi. Well, 2 weeks of the dream occurring nearly nightly, and I decided to go back to take a look at the maps. In October of 2009, there were 10 roadside memorials. My frame of mind at that time was basically, fuck this shit. I really wasn't the Scooby-Doo type, nor was Ghost Hunters my favorite show, so I decided to, you guessed it, put off looking into the shack for another time. The interesting thing about all of this is that the dreams would really only last a week tops, and they would only manifest around October of every year. Every year I'd have the dreams, and every year I would check with Google Maps to see if there were any more memorials. The strange thing, however, was that the map stopped updating the photos in October of 2009. In October of 2010, Dreams for a week, 2011. Dreams for a week, 2011, 2012, 2013. Dreams for a week. All those years, all those dreams, and no updated photos. It has gotten to the point where I basically cannot sleep during the month of October. I decided to put all of this free, sleepless time to good use. I researched the area looking for anything that might shed light on the mysterious shack and ominous figure from my dreams. At first, my findings were just depressing. Finding all the accident reports, the fatalities of men, women, and children along that highway. This research, however, morbid, did bear fruit last year as a dream changed. Or rather, the events in the dream changed ever so slightly. In October of last year, the dream was as follows. I'm in my car pulling over towards the emergency lane. The dark figure appears and raises its arm, pointing at me, shrieking, "You! You! You!" I'm staring at the figure. I can't look away, but this time I see something in the car's rearview mirror. There is a man in my rear seat. Now, this must have been a tenth of a second in real life, but in dream time, it's an eternity. I see this man and I know what he is doing. He is driving. His hands are on a steering wheel. He is driving and he is falling asleep. I woke up from the scene and instantly knew what to look for. 3 dead after hit-and-run driver plows into a roadside van. That was the headline from October of the year 2006. The article goes on to explain that a driver of a semi-truck hit a minivan that was on the side of the road near the vicinity of the shack. A mother along with her 2 small children were pulled over in the emergency lane sleeping when the drunk driver struck them sometime around 11:30 p.m. The semi-driver was heading west on the Lincoln Highway when he struck the van, sending it rolling into a shallow ditch. The mother and her son and daughter were pronounced killed at the scene. The driver of the semi's condition is unknown, which the article went on to explain. Police report that the semi-driver apparently checked on the condition of the victims in the van and for some reason dragged their bodies into the shack. It is unknown if the victims were alive at this time or not, but their bodies were found the next day wrapped in dark blankets and wedged under loose plywood boards found within the shack. The semi-driver was never found. Fast forward to October of this year, and the dreams have yet to materialize for me. Did I solve the crime? Did the poor mother just want someone to know what happened to her and her children? I don't know. But what I do know is that during the first 2 weeks of October 2014, I've had one thing and only one thing on my mind. I had to go back to the scene. I had to see that shack one last time. Call it a quest, or more accurately, an insane obsession with that place, that event in the dark so long ago, but I had to go back. I was barely aware of my prepping for it. I just took off. I got on the road and beeline to that place once again. Now, I won't bore you with details of my road trip from Oregon to that tragic little piece of highway in the middle of Nevada. Let's just say that I made it back without incident. Once I neared the scene, my mind felt a weight lifting, as if I was channeling the mother letting go of her children, of her agony, her hate. Hell, I don't know, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. Maybe it wasn't her at all, but just my feeling a sense of closure. All of these emotions ran through my mind, which should have been enough to have floored me, but they didn't. What lay before me was more sobering, more terrifying than all of the dreams, more tragic than the events that took place 8 years ago, more dreadful than that October night in 2007. In front of the shack, there are now 28 roadside memorials. Dial D for the devil. We had a few interviews with a man from Portland, Oregon. This man, John Swanson, was the one who talked in the interviews. There had been a strange call from the popular video voice application Skype, and it had been freaking him out. Here's the recordings of the interviews. First interview, December 9, 2009. Jonathan Swanson, or John, had reported to the police of a strange happening. About a month ago, he said, he was in the popular communication software Skype with his friend, James Grayson. They were playing the video game Call of Duty when they met a strange person on the game. "Hi," the person had sent them an in-game message. "Do you guys have Skype?" We can chat from voice on there. So John replied, sure, here is my Skype. I'm on it with my friend currently. My Skype is name removed because of security purposes. So, a couple of minutes later, he received a friend request from a Skype named BondFan007. He thought, okay, he's a James Bond fan. So when he joined the call, John said, I see you like James Bond. What's your favorite part of his movies? No response. There was some clanging in the background, faint, because of the sudden crackle of the microphone. Hi, said a raspy voice, whispering like they didn't want to get caught. Sorry for that. I had to, do something. There was a faint scream in the background. Shit, said the voice, followed by fumbling of the microphone. They heard the sound of a door lock, and then the creak of a chair. The voice said, sorry, again. So, what was the question again? Oh, all right, yeah. Favorite James Bond movie part? There was a dripping sound from behind the voice. Not water drips, but a much thicker, potent liquid, like blood, or spilled drink. Probably him riding in his car. That car is badass. Anyways, guys want to play around the call. Suddenly there was a scream again. This time much closer. Shit, 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 the voice repeated. There was the creak of a chair again. The sound of the lock unlocking, and then the door slammed shut. John was still in his own chair, frozen. He was wondering what was happening. James, what the hell is going on? He asked his friend James in the call. This is freaky, said James. They sat for half an hour, then heard a slam of a door. There was panting as booted steps ran towards the microphone. Hey guys, sorry, I gotta go, said the voice. I probably won't be out for a while. While he said this, there was multiple wailing screams and banging of a door. See you guys later. There was running, a door opening, then closing. Then there was silence, dead silence. What the hell, said John. Let's keep the call open, suggested James. So they did. They decided that the recording software would record the audio, then review it every night. There had been no sounds besides an occasional drip since. Second interview, August 10th, 2010. We have received reports from John Swanson and James Grayson. They said they have the FBI trying to trace the IP address to the call. Strangely, there was no IP to be found. Still, no noises except some drips. They wanted to inform us of this because they are having hackers trace it now. Third interview, August 29th, 2010. The hackers had found something. John contacted us early in the morning on August 27th of this year, frantically proclaiming that they had found something. The IP address. They have found 3 numbers of it. What was disturbing, though, was the 3 numbers were 3 sixes. This is also commonly known as the number for the beast, aka Satan, and his evil. 666, he said. We are scared to investigate furthermore now. We will probably not investigate this call anymore. It has been up for over a year now. We aren't hanging up, though. Fourth interview, January 5th, 2011. The call came in. A frantic John said they had heard something. A voice at approximately 3:58 a.m. of January 4th. They had heard a voice come in through the recording. They were reviewing it when they heard the voice that made them stay frozen for almost 10 minutes as they processed it. They said the voice had said their address. They said the voice sounded non-human, but not like a ghost. They described the voice as what a fucking nightmare would sound like if it could talk. He is frightened. John is thinking about moving now. Fifth and final interview, December 20th, 2012. We had a call come through Skype. It was John. We thought this was strange because John never used Skype anymore. He had told us at least. We decided to listen to what he had to say. John once again said he was scared. He had started hearing noises throughout his house. His friend James stopped calling him. He hadn't talked to him for a month now. He said one night he woke to something sitting on his bed. He described it as pale, very tall, with fangs and claws twice the size of John's head. He said the face was the worst. The thing looked at him. It was huge, its muscled body turning. The thing had no face. Instead, it had a mouth, an 18 hole in its face. The thing suddenly hissed at him, then jumped out his window. He says it was probably just a nightmare, but he said that was the worst nightmare he ever had. What happened next on the call was disturbing. He said, "1 second, I hear something." We heard him get up. He walked to his door. It opening, we heard a faint crackling scream. John screamed as he ran back in, slamming the door shut. "Oh God, I have to go," he said. We heard quiet hissing, perhaps from behind the door, and loud scratching. Suddenly we heard the door burst open. John wailed, and suddenly it sounded like he was gurgling something. We heard a thump, as if something big fell onto the floor. Next we heard a raspy, quiet voice that said, "You're next." And then the call ended. Wednesday, January 9th, 2013. The very next day, police had investigated John's home, but found nothing. Not a body, not even a bloodstain. The only thing they found was a carving of the number 18 in the wall. The strange thing was, 18 was the number of holes John said was in the monster's face. What was even stranger was that the number 18 was 3 sixes added together, equaling the numbers 666 that they found as the IP address to the strange man. They had the FBI and the CIA investigate everything. Nothing was found. Nothing has been found. The mystery is still out there. Where did John go? James refused to be interviewed, no matter how much money we offered or how much we begged. John has not been seen or heard from since, and probably never will. The empty storeroom. In 2009, I and my girlfriend Sam finished senior high school. Luckily, we were able to get the same college, but we were not so lucky with the residence services of our university. They were entirely filled up and neither of us got a dorm room. So we started to look for an apartment outside campus. We considered several places, but either the price would be too high or the place too shitty. On our third day of apartment hunting, Sam was looking through some classifieds in the local newspaper and giving me directions to an address. One of the addresses took us to a neighborhood which gave a feeling of a ghost town. Almost all the houses looked old, streets were abandoned, and looked like nobody lived out there. "Looks like we took a wrong turn," she said nervously. After a few minutes, just when we were about to turn to get the hell out of that creepy neighborhood, a 2-story house came into view that was brightly painted. It had coats of white on walls and roof was light blue. Looking at the house, a smile of amusement came upon my face. It looked odd. It looked like a playhouse was placed in an area hit by an apocalypse. The address at the mailbox outside the house was the same as the one mentioned in the newspaper. I parked the car outside the house, and before we could say anything, a lady of about 5'3", in her mid-40s stepped outside. Her hair was tied in a bun. She looked muscularly fat, wore an apron over her floral dress, and had a warm smile. Meet Mrs. Matthew, our soon-to-be landlady. We moved in that very week. The place we rented was on the 2nd floor, while Mrs. Matthew occupied the 1st floor. She lived alone. The main door of our floor opened up into a living room that had a kitchen attached to it. There was another door opposite the main door. It opened into a narrow hallway. On its one end was the only bedroom, and on the other side, a storage room. We had the whole floor for us except for the storage room. And though we were not given the keys to the storage room, Mrs. Matthew asked us never to open it. No matter what, she emphasized. We did not mind it. The place was spacious, clean, close to the university, and most of all, cheap. The very first night we moved in, Sam woke me up. "Can you hear that?" Sam said. She looked kind of creeped out. Her frightened expression brought me out of my sleep. I tried to listen carefully. It sounded like a scratching on wood. I opened our bedroom door and it was louder in the hallway. I stepped into the hallway and it stopped for a moment and then started again. I looked back at Sam, and she was sitting on the bed, eyes wild and open. The sound was coming from the storeroom. I tiptoed myself to the door and put my ear to it. Somebody or something was scraping on the door. I don't know why, but I knocked on the door with my knuckles. It was a knock-knock. The sound stopped. Probably a kitten stuck in there, I thought. I'll inform Miss Matthews tomorrow. I turned around to my room when somebody knocked from the other side of the door. Knock, knock. In the coming days, we realized whatever was on the other side of the door to the storeroom was supernatural. After the incident on the first night, I got excited about living in a haunted house. I was always into supernatural and stuff. But Sam was not happy with that and even asked the first few days to move to some other place. She even talked to Mrs. Matthew about it. Mrs. Matthew said that there was nothing to worry about and that we were going to be all right if we did not open the door. Sam told me Mrs. Matthew looked kind of ashamed that she did not tell us about the haunting. Sam was paranoid for a few weeks but got used to it, but she would not let me go near the door. She never remained alone in that house after dark, and whenever I was not around, she would have a girlfriend over. One day when Sam was not home, I went to the door, bent on one knee and looked through the keyhole. And even though sun was still out, it was pitch dark inside. I brought my flashlight and shone it from below the door. I was able to make out the door to the walk-in cupboard, similar to the one in our room. It was closed shut. Except for that, the room was empty. Just then, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I freaked out and had my head bust on the door handle. I turned around, holding my now throbbing head, to see Sam standing there with a frown. I said something similar to, "You scared the shit out of me." "What are you doing?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Ghost hunting," I said with a smirk. Just then the scraping started. I almost pissed myself. Sam's eyes bulged wide open. Before I could turn around, Sam raised a finger. "No," she mouthed to me. I did not pay heed and turned around on my knee. I placed a flashlight on the floor lightly so as not to make any noise. I aligned my eye to the keyhole and turned the flashlight on. Something was standing very close to the door. "Fuck!" I gasped. As much as I was excited, I was scared too. This thing was real. Sam made me swear I wouldn't go near that door or else she would walk out. That day she had come on the verge of tears as I told her that maybe I saw a leg on the other side of the door. A few days later, I went to Walmart and bought a lock-picking kit. You know, the one that comes with a couple of practice locks and the tools to pick a lock. I hid the kit behind the toilet seat and would practice on it when Sam wouldn't be home. As days went by, I became good at lock-picking, and the scraping continued. One day, during our finals, I went to bed quite late and had not slept properly the last few nights. Sam was already asleep. Just as I put my head on the pillow, the scraping started. I had got used to it, but that night it did not let me sleep, and after an hour of turning and twisting in my bed, I stormed to the toilet, picked up my kit, and headed to the storeroom. I had picked up my flashlight on my way out and had shut the bedroom door behind me. I banged on the storeroom door with my fist. "Stop it, you son of a bitch, or I will come in and make you," I said. It stopped for a while and then started again. "I'm coming in, and you will regret this." I bent on my knee and started to pick the lock. It looked like it was rarely used. Just when I had started picking, the scratching stopped, and I heard what sounded like dragging footsteps receding to the walk-in cupboard. "You can't run, you SOB," I thought to myself. I was tired and angry. I was out of my mind. I pushed the last pin up in the lock and turned the wedge to unlock the door. I twisted the handle and swung the door open. I opened without any sound. I regretted it instantaneously for 2 reasons. One, whatever was in there was probably more powerful than me. I mean, it had beaten death, right? 2, I had learned to pick the lock open but did not know how to undo it. What was I going to say to Mrs. Matthew? She had been very nice to us, and now she may throw us out. and we may not have a place to live with our finals on. I ushered all those thoughts aside and stepped inside. Curiosity is a motherfucker. I shone my light around. The room was a ditto copy of our room, except it did not have a door leading to a toilet, and it was empty. I walked to the cupboard on my tiptoes, as not to startle whatever was in there. I slowly opened the cupboard door. Inside was the most heinous of sights I had ever seen. There were bodies piled up on each other. There were a few in the corner. One sat with its back to the pile and legs spread out, looking directly at me with hollow eyes. My eyes widened as much as they could, and all I heard was my heartbeat. What even intrigues me today about the bodies was there was no smell. They were rotting, but the air smelled normal there. Well, if there had been someone else in my place, they may have passed out. But my father was a surgeon, and I had mingled, not literally, with dead bodies since I was a child. I noticed that the body in the sitting position had the upper half part of its fingers missing and tip of what remained of its fingers shredded. He was the one scratching on the door. I would have investigated a bit longer had I not heard Sam scream. I turned around to the door and stopped. It had been closed, not all the way, but partially. What made me stand there while my girlfriend was screaming for help was the scratches on the door. They were not mindless scratches by an entity asking to be let out. There were words etched on the door. I did not shut the door, but closed it all the way. It read, "The landlady is a killer. Run for your life. Get out." As I read it, I stumbled backward, and flashlight fell from my hand and rested facing the door. Sam had stopped screaming. A few moments later, the door creaked open. Funny, I thought. It had not made that sound before. Mrs. Matthews stepped inside the room, holding a butcher knife. She was bathed in blood. Nobody could have told her apron was once white. She still had her warm smile on. "If you had not opened the room, you would not have seen it coming," she spoke, still smiling. "You see, Scotty, here has a nasty bit of writing on the door," she said, pointing the broad blade of the butcher knife toward the cupboard. I looked back and I noticed the body that was sitting had now tilted its head, just a bit, and was looking at Mrs. Matthew with its hollow eyes. Maybe it was a trick of light, but I believe it had an expression of disgust on its face. "No dinner for you today," she said, still looking at Scotty, and then started to giggle like a schoolgirl. Then she looked at me and said, "It is easy when you don't see it coming, but it's a lot less fun."